Hey, everybody. Welcome back to High Vibin' It. As always, we're pumped to have you here. And as a reoccurring topic, we are speaking on self-love with another self-love guru slash nerd slash woman who's obsessed like us. So it's a great fit. We're really excited to have Miss Lizzy Cangro on. She's an expert nutritionist and a wellness coach, and she wrote the book Reclaim the Rebel, which we will get into, and it's going to be epic. So yeah, Lizzy, thanks for being here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, and thank you for having me.
Of course. Lindsay, take it away.
Take it away. Take it away, Lindsay. Lindsay, this is going to be really fun. Kelsey, just be very careful because it sounds the same.
I know.
We've had people on that are also Kelsey, and I'm like, Kelsey 1, Kelsey 2, go. It's not quite the same. Lizzy, I really want to hear your story. I want you to I know this, you've probably talked about this before, but what kind of brought you to doing this? When did you realize it was such an important thing to love yourself, love your body, and really grow in that way? So yeah, whatever you want to share with us, I know the listeners would be happy to hear and resonate with your story.
Absolutely. And I feel like it's the case with most people in the wellness space, is that you're so passionate about what you do because of your own personal journey. But before I go into that, I just want to also say that on Friday, I went to Starbucks and they wrote Lindsay on my Starbucks cup. So sidetrack, but yeah.
You know what?
Very similar.
Every time I tell someone Lindsay over the phone, they say Wendy. And I'm like, yeah, it's Wendy.
Let's go with
My
that.
name's Wendy.
Yeah.
Yep. So funny.
You can be anybody who you want to be.
Exactly.
And so really, going back to how I really became so passionate about self-love is because I had my own journey to achieving unconditional love for your body, really starting when I was 14 years old. And I developed an eating disorder. And that eating disorder, I talk a little bit more in depth about kind of the events that kind of led up to it. But it came from a place of not trusting myself with my food. And as a result, I looked to external sources. At that point, it was mostly magazines. We didn't really have social media back then. But I looked to magazines to tell me what to eat in order to be healthy. And as a result, I came across some not so good advice and made myself very, very sick. And at the time, I was also doing a lot of running, and that was one thing that I was good at in school, and that made me kind of popular amongst the girls and the boys. But because I wasn't fueling my body correctly, I became skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And this is something that kind of got picked up on by my peers. But because I was good at running and because I was getting skinny, both the guys and the girls were kind of praising me because of this. And so it was kind of this vicious cycle where I descended into anorexia nervosa. And it took me 10 years to fully recover from the physical aspects of that self-abusive cycle of using food to kind of, I guess, control my body, and using exercise to punish my body. But it wasn't really until after I'd fully recovered and I became a nutritionist, because I was so passionate about making sure that others got advice that was reliable and that they didn't run into the same issues that I ran into when I was 14 years old. Only when I kind of had gone through that process and retrained, before that I was a teacher, did I actually realize that there was still a missing piece. And that missing piece was how I was abusing myself mentally. So the physical aspects of my health were pretty much dialed in. I had a much more balanced approach to my nutrition and my exercise, but I wasn't speaking to myself in a way that I would speak to other people. And I think this is a deeper and more widespread issue amongst the world in general. And that is something that I turned into referring as a mean girl. And when I was first out in California, I was studying to become a fitness instructor. And then afterwards, I was able to open my own practice. And when I opened my practice, I had more and more clients come to me doing all of the things in terms of having healthful nutrition and exercise behaviors, but they were so stressed out, so negative towards their bodies, and they didn't understand why a common reason why people come to me is they want to lose weight because they want to feel good in their bodies. And so they didn't realize that actually these mindset blocks were preventing them from actually having a body that they loved. And so this is something that I dived into in my own personal development, because at the time I was still feeling very insecure in my body. Just moving to California, I'm a Brit with fair skin, and everybody around me was tone tanned. And I didn't feel good enough for my boyfriend. And so I kind of dived into it from a place of wanting to improve my own self-image and self-love. But in turn, I discovered all of these tools that were super simple but effective that I could use on my clients to also help them improve their self-image, their confidence, and ultimately achieve unconditional love for their body.
Oh, I'm muted. What's up? What's up, everyone? I'm back. What a great story. There was I love your journey, and I think that it's one that, as you said in the beginning, people can resonate with, doing their own growing through, or rather teaching about growth through their own experience. I don't know how old you are, but I do know that when I was in high school and when I was, I don't know, that age, you get all kinds of messages, right, of what is acceptable and how to be in the world and what will get you shunned. And so you try everything to not be shunned and to not be ostracized. And unfortunately, a lot of those things are very, very, very unhealthy. And the biggest thing, I mean, how different, I know for me, my life would be immensely different if I had learned the self-talk piece first, right? The self-talk piece first, and then everything kind of just naturally unfolds from there. But if you are doing all the things, even the healthy things physically, and you're still beating yourself up inside, you're doing nothing. Whereas if you, I think, and you're the nutritionist, but I have found for me, when I start talking to myself nicer, I don't even necessarily have to do as much, because the pieces kind of fill in themselves and the puzzle kind of puts itself together. And it's not that way for everybody, but it must be one of the first things you do if you really want to have lasting change, because it's such a cliche to say, but the biggest relationship you're ever going to have is the one with yourself. And if you're not nurturing that and growing that and loving on that, what are you doing? Like, what do you hope to get out of this situation? So yeah, I really love that story and how the importance that you placed on self-talk, because as a hypnotherapist, that is number one, right? Like, how are you talking to yourself? And you may not always notice it. It's one of those insidious things, right? That we don't notice because nobody tells us to notice it. Nobody teaches us that. And in fact, they kind of stay away from any internal monologue and say, go buy this thing, go have a relationship with this person, go do this thing outside of yourself. Don't worry about what's going on inside. It doesn't matter until it really, really does. So I'm glad that you talked about that. It's very important.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your story. And something interesting that's standing out to me is like how you're talking about how you were praised for becoming thinner and thinner. Whereas like for me, I was always naturally really thin and I would get picked on for being so skinny. So it's like,
Oh yeah,
no matter what you're doing, you can't win. You're never going to win. It doesn't matter how your body looks. You can't create a body that's going to get you the love that you can't get from yourself, right? So
right.
it doesn't matter if you're trying to gain weight, become more curvy, become more muscular, become less overweight. Like, there is no ideal body that's gonna like help you win at like socialization or even just like you loving yourself more. It's
Yeah.
really all in the mind and comes down to your relationship, which is, it always comes back to self-love,
And
doesn't
even
it?
if it does. And even if it's not weight, I never got commented on no matter what weight I was. I got commented on with my height because I'm tiny. I'm a pocket person. And every single time, every friend group I was in, every time someone met me for the first time, it was, oh my gosh, you're so little. I was like, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. What am I supposed to say to that? So Kelsey, absolutely on point. It does not matter. They'll find something to make you different. And I just am like, win the game. I don't even want to play. Let me just I'm not playing anymore.
Seriously.
Absolutely. And I feel like, from such a young age, this is where kind of the lack of awareness comes in, because we're bombarded with all of these kind of messages from, society at large, but also kind of like our family and friends from the age of, since we're born, pretty much, your brain is such a sponge at that very young age that you just pick up on all of these things, and we don't know how to interpret them. As you say, it can be related to our height. What does being shorter mean? Like, what, is that?
How am I supposed to feel about myself? What do you want me to be feeling right now?
Exactly. And so, all of these messages kind of get poured onto us and just become part of our subconscious belief system until we don't really have that awareness of them being part of our lives. They just are who we identify as. And so really the first step in terms of turning this all around is having that awareness that you're talking about, is kind of like shining a light onto some of the stories that we've sort of had buried for decades.
And I want you to speak about this too, because I know for me, when I'm teaching this to clients, I'm like, I have to say, okay, all we're going to do is notice it, but we're not going to judge. It's like I don't even finish the sentence before I have to interject it, because it is such a deep seated thing. So how do you, I guess, do you work with clients, or, I mean, I'm sure what's in your book? Let's talk about that, about the non-judgment piece, because I do think it's just so important that we break that cycle. You're judging yourself for judging yourself at this point. Like, what do you do?
Yeah,
Stop that right now.
And I got stuck in that loop for a very, very long time. And yes, that is definitely something that I work with clients with one-on-one. And I also talk about it in several chapters of the book, in terms of kind of our inner mean girl is essentially us shaming and judging ourselves. Now, shame kind of keeps us in line and keeps us kind of like trying to fit into society's standards, and judgment just makes us feel bad and just makes us feel like we're not enough. And so really kind of like breaking that cycle kind of involves, first of all, realizing that these stories aren't our stories, and kind of with love giving them back to where they came from, even if it is, our family, and they are getting those stories from somewhere. So that's another way of kind of reframing things, as opposed to getting frustrated and judging them for having the stories. So that's one way, is sort of giving those stories back. But another way is also kind of realizing that our own inner mean girl, who is kind of the source of that shame and judgment, is trying to, at some level, protect us by keeping things the same, right?
Yeah.
Because us humans all just want to be safe. And sometimes, whilst our inner mean girl's stories are not what we want to hear, the stories are the most safe stories for us to hear, because they're predictable. And so that is a very freeing way for me, as someone who was starting to kind of like make shifts to look at the inner mean girl, is just kind of like, oh, well, actually, it's just a self-protection mechanism. And I had the power to actually change that, and to kind of reassure this part of me that it's okay to, to make changes to my stories and my beliefs without it harming me.
Oh my God,
Yes.
so important.
So
Kelsey,
powerful.
I want you to say something, because I have something to say. So you go first.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna, drive the point home that to have compassion for the parts of you that create the most dysfunction in your life is like one of the most transformational tools and practices you can do, because it's impossible for you to be against yourself. Even your most evil, mean, dysfunctional, critical, horrible, unlikable parts have all developed inside of your psyche for a reason, for a valid reason, and usually to try to protect you or to help you get a need met or to help you avoid some type of pain. So, to push these parts away is actually the opposite of healing, to bring them closer and
Mhm.
be like, hey, inner mean girl, I get that you're trying to help me avoid outer criticism by criticizing me on the inside. I get that you're trying to keep me in line and I appreciate your good intentions, but like, we don't need to do that anymore. These stories aren't real. We picked them up from wherever and, we're growing up and we're moving on. So I definitely wholeheartedly believe in your
Mhm.
approach because it's something that I also like teach
Yeah.
hardcore as well. So love to hear it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to double back and talk about how you're wanting to release these stories to whoever gave them to, even if you don't know who that was, you don't really have to release it to source, release it to the universe, release it to God, whatever you feel comfortable with. You're allowed to do that. You don't have to know where it came from, and you also don't have to keep it. The other thing that I'm glad that you said is the safety piece. It feels, sure, I want to do this, but who am I without this story? Who am I without this limit or this thought about myself? And it is a scary thing for a second, because you just don't know, and your brain is going into overdrive, like, oh, I need a plan, I need to figure this out, like we're in danger. Unknowns are just as dangerous to your subconscious as a known danger. So that is a very important piece to mention. That's why it feels that way, because your subconscious is really just trying to protect you in the only way that it knows how. What's important to remember about that is just because it feels unsafe doesn't mean it is. And another reason it feels unsafe is because your subconscious, again, doesn't know expiry dates. It has no idea that there's a time limit on when this is relevant versus not, because it just doesn't exist. So if you learned something at 14 that felt so true at the time, it doesn't know that you're ever going to not need it. It just doesn't know that. And once you can kind of get on board with this idea, it then becomes your responsibility, not in a bad way, in a beautiful way, to teach your subconscious, like, oh, you know what? We don't actually need this. And this feels better and more expansive. And I think we should just go in this direction. Just trust me. We're going to be fine. You just trust me. We're going to go in this direction. And it just makes it easier. But the feeling afraid is natural, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means your brain is misunderstanding what's happening.
Absolutely.
Classic.
Yeah. And I feel like it's also it's not a linear process either.
Exactly.
And that's something that it took a while for me to accept, is that, sometimes, even though you've been on this journey for a while of sort of, telling your subconscious it's okay and it's okay and it's okay, something might come up that kind of like triggers that inner mean girl thought again. And it's very easy to kind of like go, oh my goodness, why can't I get rid of this thought? And sort of almost get sucked back into that vicious cycle of judging yourself that you haven't, completely shifted that belief yet. But it really is a sort of an up down cycle, but just generally progressing and sort of having that self-compassion in itself to kind of say, well, I'm human and this inner mean girl is going to come up at points, even though I've been working on it for a while.
And how amazing am I for noticing that it's happening now, whereas a month ago, 3 months ago, I would never have noticed that this is an inner mean girl. So good job, me. Like, obviously you're farther than you were, or you would never have, it wouldn't have come into your brain, but I do understand that feeling of, I thought I did all this work. I thought I was past this, and maybe all that stuff was for nothing. I promise you it's not for nothing. You haven't lost any momentum. It's just beautifully said by Lizzy. It's not a linear process. It's just not.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. Because I think in the personal development space, when you're really into it, it's easy to be like, oh, we already healed this, or oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm having this problem again, or I thought I was enlightened enough to not be triggered anymore. Like the fact that we don't even give ourselves the space to get triggered is crazy. Like we are still people at the end of the day, no matter how self-aware you become, no matter how self-loving you become, like you're not going to be immune to getting triggered or having regressive type moments. I'm using air quotes for regressive because they're not really, it's just another level of expansion. But yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that piece because it's important.
And what's my favorite quote? It doesn't get easier, you just get better. It doesn't get easier, you just get better. It will feel easier because you are better at it.
It's like any practice, right? Like you go to the gym to work out and build a muscle. You can't just expect to sort of like build a muscle in a day.
Oh,
You've done it over time, right? So
I hate working out. I get so frustrated. I'm like, where's my freaking six pack that I had when I was 13? Where is that at? I want that. I wish. But you're right. It just doesn't happen that way. You have to actually work for it.
Lizzy, I have a question I've been dying to ask you since you mentioned like lovingly letting go of the stories. Would you be so kind as to share with us some of the stories that you let go of that were beneficial for you to let go of in order for you to come into more love for your body?
Yeah. Oh, so many stories. But one of my biggest stories was actually something that prevented me from showing up on camera or showing up for my business. And that was that I was ugly. And that story came from being teased in the playground when I was like 7 for looking like one of the teachers. And I took that to mean that I looked old, I had bags under my eyes. And so like by the age of about 10, I was researching these expensive anti-aging eye creams because I was trying to fix my face.
10?
And I was 10. I was in it would have been the middle school equivalent. So yeah. And then I think a couple of years later, I got told that I needed glasses. So I was like, oh, great. I can use them to cover up my face and hide. And that kind of like created this whole identity around like the quiet nerd girl who like didn't show her face on camera, or like I was the one that was taking the pictures. And that stayed with me until during COVID, my boyfriend, now husband, and I went running, but we went running in masks because it was that time when, you had to mask up everywhere. And so I had my glasses on and I had my mask.
Wait,
and
did paparazzi show up and think you were someone famous?
No, they did not. That would have been a really cool story. But actually, this wouldn't, I mean, this wouldn't have happened any other time. But I was breathing so heavily into my mask that kind of like I started to mist up, when like you open an oven door and you like fog up. It was the same thing. So I went to like adjust the side of my frames to kind of like get rid of some of this fog, and the glasses broke in my hand. And at that time, it was around the same time that I was kind of starting to really dive into kind of personal development work from the kind of perspective of mindset and kind of connecting with the universe. And I literally just went, F you, universe, because I knew in that moment, I was like, oh, that's a sign. I actually had to kind of like confront the person in the mirror, stop hiding. I had contact lenses that I had at home. I'd had them for, a year or so because I wanted to address this belief. I know we were talking earlier about, how we've kind of got this desire, but it doesn't feel safe. Well, in that moment, I was like forced into not feeling safe. And I had to wear these contact lenses, look at myself in the mirror, and actually confront the story of I'm ugly. And it felt so soul crushing to confront that story. But this is one of the tools that I used to really overcome my self-sabotaging behaviors and thoughts about my body. I used a mirror exercise by Louise Hay, where you look in the mirror and you tell yourself that you love the body parts that you don't necessarily love, or you reframe. What I like to do is actually reframe the stories to something that's more believable. So it doesn't have to be I love you. It can be something like oh, I'm so grateful for the shape of my face because it means that I look good in hats, something like that, something that you can realistically believe. And so I started to use this exercise every single time I looked in the mirror when I wasn't wearing my glasses, and slowly change that story of I'm ugly to something that felt more empowering and more realistic, not that kind of toxic body positivity of I love myself, I love myself, I love myself.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that I could actually believe and that I felt empowered to tell myself. And I mentioned that exercise in the book and that story as well, because it really was a deep rooted story that had been hanging around for a very long time. And thank goodness to the universe for helping me change that.
This is what I was going to say. We love you, universe. Sorry, we do get mad at you sometimes because you show us what we really need to hear and not what we want to hear. But I love that there's so many times that I'll get just the one thing that I don't want, right? But you got to do it. And it's just like so crazy making, but what a beautiful sign. And you knew exactly what it meant. Like it knew exactly how to talk to you in that moment. Like this is a non-missable message that she's going to get. But yeah, it's mirror work is so powerful. And I give it to clients only sometimes if I feel like they're, ready and it's something that they can do. Cause it is hard. It's hard if you do love yourself. It is hard, especially when they say like, make sure you look into your own eyes. And it's like, what?
It feels so uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. It is very uncomfortable, but if you can do it, when you can do it, it is very, very, very beautiful and healing. And it is one of the most profound things you can do for a reason, because it is that potent and it is that powerful. So thank you for sharing that. Really.
Yes. Great exercise. Would you feel like sharing one or two more of your favorites, maybe from the book or ones that you do with yourself or with clients, as far as building more body confidence in like the self-image? Because what's crazy to me in your story is like your story of thinking that you're ugly when like anyone with eyes can see that you're clearly not. So like everybody has these stories, right? Like my nose is horrible. I'm too this, I'm too that. I'm not this, I'm not enough. What are some of your other favorite practices that you feel like have worked the best?
Yeah. In terms of specific to body confidence, I think letting go of comparison is huge. I think a lot of our internal turmoil comes from what I call like shitting on yourself, like comparing yourself to others.
We always say that on the show.
Soul sister.
Shitting on yourself is like the worst thing that you can do, because essentially kind of like you're saying, I don't have that, I should look like this. And so to overcome that kind of comparison and that kind of, well, I should have this, I turn it around and use like a gratitude list. So that a gratitude list focuses on what you do have as opposed to what you don't have. And so again, you can start off not necessarily by listing absolutely everything that you love about your body, but you can list some things that you're grateful about in terms of your life, your health. And then when you start to look for things that you're grateful for, just in general, you'll start to notice things that you're grateful for in terms of your body, and you can kind of gradually add that in. So that's one of my favorite things to use in terms of specifically body image, because that was something that really helped me overcome my insecurities around my skin tone when I moved to California. I literally would get a spray tan from a salon every single week before COVID, just to cover up my skin. And because the salon closed during the pandemic, I couldn't do that anymore. And so I literally fell to pieces in front of my boyfriend, because I was like, oh no, he hasn't seen like the real me. He's gonna not blood me anymore.
And then he freaking married you.
And then he married me. So
just take a beat here. That's so funny.
Yeah. And the gratitude list, I think, really helped with that, because at that point I was still that was before the whole glasses gate thing that we talked about, and so I kind of like started thinking about how grateful I was that my body was healthy, how grateful I was that I was actually in California. That's something that I would never even dream of when I was tiny. So that really, really helped. Another tool that I really like.
Can I pause you 1 second? Add to that? Okay. So I love this practice because gratitude is amazing, but also sometimes it's like when we don't like certain parts of our body, right? We can't like fake that we do. It's like that,
Yeah.
toxic positivity, like how we said. So instead of pretending that you love it, you can at least appreciate something about it. Like if
Right.
you don't like your stretch marks after having a kid, it's like, well, maybe I don't like how they look, but I'm grateful for my children. And these are like my battle wounds. Or, yeah, maybe I don't like the shape of my nose, but I'm grateful that it helps me breathe. Maybe I don't like my
Mhm.
crooked teeth, but I'm grateful that I'm able to eat. And you can have genuine gratitude for that area or that part, even if you're not necessarily obsessed with how it looks to you. So I think that's super beneficial. And to take it even like another layer further into the subconscious, like if you're having trouble getting rid of the comparison, it's that same parts work that we were talking about before. Like, what is the pure positive intention of comparing yourself to other people? Why would it be a good thing to compare yourself to others? If you can sit with that question and maybe realize, oh, I'm comparing myself to try and keep up, or oh, I'm comparing myself to try and feel better about myself, or oh, I'm comparing myself to try to motivate myself to change so I can feel more inner peace, or XYZ. You can again come to that space of compassion and then lovingly let go of the comparison. Like, okay, to get to where I want to go, meaning to feel how I want to feel, actually, this is not helping me. This technique of comparison is not helping me, even though a part of me believes that it is helpful to compare. So we're gonna let that go now. We're gonna shift to a
Yeah.
gratitude mindset. Cause I think where a lot of people get stuck, they're like, oh, how am I just supposed to shift from comparison to gratitude? And it's like, well, if you have resistance to letting go of the comparison, explore that first as like a sub step, and then get into the gratitude piece. I think is like so
Okay.
beneficial.
So I have a challenge for
Give it
the
to us.
panel.
The panel.
So here's the thing. When you say, Lizzy, when you first brought up stop the comparison, love it. Amazing. Shout it from the rooftops. The first thing I think of, because I see this with clients, and if I'm going to play this game, I do this with myself. I compare to me 10 years
Mm.
ago. I compare to me when I was stress free. I compare to me when I, had breastfeeding boobs. Hello. I compare myself to me a lot. So that is a great example of, okay, well, I can't not how do you not compare to your own self? Because it's like a double-edged sword, because that it was you and you have done this. So why can't I do this again? But then it's also like, well, wait, why can't I do this again? Why is it not happening? It must be the hardest thing in the world because I know I did this. So while you guys were talking and speaking such beautiful truth into this podcast, I was thinking like, okay, so in those moments where I'm like, oh, my skin's too blotchy, like it was not this way when I was 27 or, whatever. Uh, One thing that, I'm just trying to think of like things that I could, I don't know, reframe that. Like maybe I know more, right, than I did
Well,
when I was 27.
okay, I'm gonna let Lizzy
Help
give her
me.
2 cents, and then I'm gonna give my 2 cents, and we're gonna do
Yes.
like group coaching session live
Please,
on
please,
air.
please.
Love it.
I love this. I love this so much because it is such a common thing that I see in my practice, including when people's photos pop up on their memories on social media. I literally had a discussion with a client like the other day about this, and she said, that she got triggered because she saw a photo of herself when she was slimmer. And she got really frustrated because she was like, well, why can't I be like this again? And so in her case, what we discussed was actually what progress she made since that photo was taken. And we actually talked about how she got to that place via a very unhealthy way of doing it. And so in the context of kind of bodies changing, sometimes it's a matter of kind of like really looking at the context a little bit more and going, okay, well, I did look like that, but at that time, like I was in huge anxiety because I didn't think I looked good, or I was fueling myself in a very unhealthy, unbalanced way, and I wasn't enjoying myself. Right. Whereas now, like I'm not starving myself, or I'm not hating on myself as much. And so that's generally what I coach clients through a lot of the time, is actually how their body size has changed over the years. but how their story has also changed.
Yeah.
I like that context piece. That's kind of that was kind of my angle on it too. Like, you have to think of when you had those pregnancy boobs, like the context was you were pregnant. Like, you can't just expect
No.
yourself.
Well, yes. Breastfeeding boobs are different than pregnancy boobs.
Okay.
Breastfeeding boobs, I
Breastfeeding
basically am
boobs.
leashed to my child 24/7 because I have to make sure that they are getting, I can't just go on a vacation. I can't go anywhere without them. So it's great, but it's also like, I remember thinking, I cannot wait until I'm done nursing because I want my freedom.
Right. And now here you are. And then it's
Now I
funny
miss
that
it.
you're like, oh, well, I wish I could go back, even though when I was there, I wish
but
that I wasn't there.
it is funny. It is one of those, the grass is greener, but I think that I do have a lot of fondness for myself before kids, purely because, God, what the hell was I stressed about? What could I have possibly been stressed about? Nothing. What? Like, all I was doing was thinking about how I could have more fun. I was in LA, Lizzy. I was in LA with my friends. We're like, it's 3 a.m. You want to go to Vegas? Yeah, let's go to Vegas. Why not? Let's just drive there. And I live here, so it's different and I don't love it, but it's like, you could do whatever you wanted. I had no responsibilities. But that's really the biggest thing that I like think back on. Other than that, I mean, what would I trade? I wouldn't trade anything. I don't think I would trade anything for that level of frivolity, because the moments that here's what I'll say. The moments that I have now in my life as I am are so much more profound. Any given moment. Look over at my kid and just see him watching TV is the most profound, so much more profound than any night in Vegas I ever could have had. So, I mean, maybe. I'm just kidding. Jokes. But it's true. Like, all of my moments are just so much more rich. And I think that for the moms out there who have the fondness for their younger lives, like I do, I think we're human and we're allowed to do that. Talk to me when I get gray hairs. I might have something different to say, but Kelsey has just like, she's going to be my teacher. You're going to be my teacher, because I wish you and my husband both are like, I love my wisdom.
I mean, the gray hair reframe is just like, I just look in the mirror and I'm like, yeah, I'm only 28 and I have all this gray hair, but like, it's just my wisdom showing.
It's your wisdom.
It's your wisdom.
My husband's like,
There's
this is
always
all
a
stress.
good reframe. And then I just think of like how it makes me even more witchy and like mystical. And I have like this big curly hair with like gray sparkles coming through.
Yes.
And I'm just like,
the
it's just
crown.
my witchery. It's fine.
Yeah.
But to talk on the comparison piece a little bit more, I think comparison in general as a practice is kind of insane, because if you think like, you wouldn't actually compare like a tree to a flower, right? They're both plants, but they're completely different. And yes, from an objective standpoint, you can say that trees are sturdier and, they're bigger and they're more impressive. But like, can you say that? Like, how can you compare two different things that are so different?
So
you
Kelsey's a tree person. We know that.
So different. Well, I was just looking at trees right now and I don't have any flowers nearby, but it's like, how can you compare an apple and an orange? It's just preference, right? Do you want something sweet? Do you want something tart? Do you want something orange? Do you want something green? Like, you can't compare yourself to another. That's a practice that's insane. Right. And you can't compare yourself to a different version of yourself, because that's also insane. So, like, when you really think about it, comparison is like wackadoodle.
I like that, because no matter what you try, let's use the self piece, comparing to your own self. Well, no matter what you try, you are cellularly a different person. All of your cells have regenerated. Your skin is different. Your DNA is different. Like, you are cellularly a different person. So I like that, because it makes me feel like it helps me understand that I am exactly who I'm supposed to be right now, and helps me embrace that. Because thinking constantly of who I was and who, for a lot of us, who you were in the past and the things you did and were able to do, irrelevant. You might as well be thinking of a parallel universe, which could be fun, but not productive.
Hey there. We hope you're enjoying this episode so far, but if you want to listen to the whole thing, we're going to invite you over to our podcast. Either search for High Vibing It on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you guys listen to podcasts, Or even better, if you want to watch the extended video version of this episode that's even longer than the actual podcast itself, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/highvibe. Lindsay, tell them what's awesome about the Patreon.
Patreon is where we have all of our extended episodes. As Kelsey said, we have it on video, so you can actually see the things that we're talking about. Sometimes we have visual aids, and it's nice to know what we're talking about. We also have hangouts that we do sometimes that are exclusive to Patreon people. And you can get started with all of this and bonus content and everything that we have only for the Patreon people for as little as $3. I think it's $3.33 a month. And that's it. And you guys can get all the benefits and all access to everything that we put in there. Really
Yeah.
cool.
It's really cool, really fun, super easy to join. And you guys don't even have to do that to finish this episode. If you're like, screw it, I don't want to pay any money, I just want to hear the rest of this episode, go to our podcast, High Vibe in It, search for it wherever you listen. It's totally free. Either way, enjoy the rest of the show wherever you choose to enjoy it. And we will see you guys next week because we do a new one every week. Adios.
Bye.